Originally, Canadians were told that the risk of experiencing myocarditis was around 1 in 100,000 people after taking COVID-19 vaccines. More recently, Dr. Kieran Moore, the Chief Medical Health Officer in Ontario, has let the public know that they should assess the risks for the pros when it comes to taking the COVID-19 vaccines, mRNA, the mRNA ones, in particular for children, because it is more closer to around 1 in 5,000. Is any of this money going towards looking into how many children in Canada are suffering from myocarditis or pericarditis as a result of taking these vaccines? The federal government is giving millions of dollars to further mRNA vaccine technology, but will any of that money be going towards better understanding adverse reactions associated with it? I'm in front of UBC to go inside and ask people who are making that announcement that very question. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, standing in front of UBC on October 3rd, where MP for Vancouver South, as well as the Minister of International Development and Minister responsible for the Pacific Economic Development Agency of Canada, is about to make an announcement about the federal government funding millions of dollars for mRNA vaccine research. We're going to take you inside so you can hear from those in attendance themselves, but in particular, I want to ask the question that I suspect the legacy media won't. Recently, the Chief Medical Health Officer of Ontario, Dr. Kieran Moore, announced that parents or the public in general should assess the risks for the benefits when it comes to taking the COVID-19 vaccines, in particular for children. That is because what was once told to Canadians, that only 1 in 100,000 people are likely to get myocarditis from COVID-19 vaccines, has now, according to him, been as high as 1 in 5,000, in particular when it comes to male youth.
Why not just recommend it to everybody instead of saying it's a personal decision?
Because at present we're doing a risk-based approach.
What's the risk?
The risk, there's always a risk to having any therapeutic versus a benefit. You want to make sure there's a very strong benefit versus the risk. If for an 18-year-old healthy individual, the risk to getting hospitalized if we have no underlying medical illness is very, very low. We know there is a risk, a very small risk, 1 in 5,000 that may get myocarditis, for example, and you'd have to have that discussion on the risk-benefit of a complication from the vaccine versus a benefit of decreased hospitalization for a young, healthy person.
In light of new information like that, as well as other health bodies like Danish Health not offering the COVID vaccines to children at all, I want to know if the people inside of this building will answer whether or not any of the millions of dollars that's going to further mRNA vaccine technology has been going to look to see how many of our Canadian children have been suffering from these vaccine injuries. Now, if you appreciate that I'm about to ask this question, then maybe you want to make sure you get more news from us, because we don't back down from asking the questions that the legacy media ignores. And one way you can do that is become a subscriber to rebelnewsplus.com, where you get exclusive content from us, including our documentaries that you won't see on TV, as well as being the first to know on certain other shows as well. So that's rebelnewsplus.com. You can join for as little as $7 a month, and everything you contribute there goes to help further our independent journalism.
Today I'm announcing $11.1 million in funding to Pacific End for the University of British Columbia. And this funding will support 2 complementary projects that will enhance the delivery and efficiency of mRNA vaccines. $3.5 million of this funding will support research to optimize how mRNA vaccines are administered on a cellular level, improving their uptakes into the body. Now, this can streamline the production of existing vaccines and reduce side effects. It will also inform the development of future medicines around the world. The second project will receive $7.6 million in funding. And in this project, researchers will use artificial intelligence to identify and tackle new COVID variants before they spread. Now, both these projects will be done in partnership with the local bioscience sector. They will create jobs, produce highly skilled professionals, and grow our sector's revenues. And together, these projects set up for continued advances in vaccine development. They will also solidify BC as an international leader in the biotechnology sector.
Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Can you state your name and your news organization, please?
Thank you. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News. Originally, Canadians were told that the risk of experiencing myocarditis was around 1 in 100,000 people after taking COVID-19 vaccines. More recently, Dr. Kieran Moore, the Chief Medical Health Officer in Ontario, has let the public know that they should assess the risks for the pros when it comes to taking the COVID-19 vaccines, mRNA, the mRNA ones, in particular for children, because it is more closer to around 1 in 5,000 children, in particularly males who are experiencing that heart injury after taking the COVID-19 vaccines. Lastly, just recently out of Thailand, a study that monitored the hearts of 301 children pre-taking the Pfizer vaccine and after found that closer to 1 in 45 of those children were experiencing myocarditis, pericarditis, including those who had asymptomatic symptoms before being tested after taking that vaccine. You guys today have announced a lot of research, $11 million going into researching more efficient ways for this mRNA treatment to be received by Canadians. Was any of this money, is any of this money going towards looking into how many children in Canada are suffering from myocarditis or pericarditis as a result of taking these vaccines?
I'm not familiar with the actual the points that you raised. I'm not familiar exactly about that. One thing I can say that when the pandemic hit, was very quick. Thank goodness for all the talent that we have, not only in this country, the collaboration that was done around the world to create this, the vaccine, the life-saving vaccines. But the work continues, and that's what today's announcement is about, is to making sure that we give the resources to the scientific community to start looking at how can we minimize the side effects, how can we actually start trying to predict what the variants will be. And in terms of some of your particular detailed scientific questions, I'm sure some of our health officials can answer those.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. So then, since you can't specifically answer, I'll ask you specifically as a minister, do you think that any of the millions of dollars going towards research on the mRNA vaccine should go towards whether our vulnerable children are at risk from them in any way and making sure that the public is able to understand those risks?
I think we take it very seriously when it comes to anything to our children. I think the length of time that was taken to making sure that the vaccines are safe. More importantly, within our own Canadian standards, that Canadians can trust within our system that we have when it comes to any type of medication or food, that we have the highest standards around the world. And it's one of the things, again, I just want to thank our scientific community, especially the researchers at universities like this. When you see the enthusiasm within the young research, when you see also the people who are here, they're also parents, they have young kids as well. We all want the best, and we will make sure that, we always want to make sure that the right research and the right protective measures go towards the others.
Thank you for your time.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Leonard Foster, I'm a professor of biochemistry here at UBC, and I'm one of the lead researchers on the project that was just two projects that were just announced.
Okay, so very exciting.
Yep.
Now, I'm not sure if you heard my question well.
I think I heard all of it.
Okay, so what's your thoughts on some of the 11 million that has gone into what you guys are working on, going into better understanding adverse reactions, in particular for children with myocarditis and pericarditis?
So obviously that's an important aspect of it. So one little sort of administrative nuance here is that Pacific Can only funds capital infrastructure, so equipment. So the money that would actually be required for a clinical trial like you're getting at is just not eligible by the federal government's rules around PacificCan. But that, I mean, I totally agree that there should be clinical trial funding for those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I think, one of the first projects that was described to basically look at the formulation of the lipid nanoparticles, that can probably be adjusted, and that adjustment by the research described today can probably speak to lessening any potential side effects that we may have. It also would improve the delivery of the particles, the mRNA particles, right into the lipid vesicles themselves. So it's changing the formulation, it's looking at doing this perhaps more effectively, and also maybe changing the amount of lipid or the type of lipid that might be used. What we have today is fantastic, but we could probably improve it as well.
You quoted a statistic from Thailand, I think you said.
That's a preprint study, and it's 1 in 43 out of 301. It's around 7, I think.
That's a little hard to, I haven't seen the study, so I can't question that. If the numbers were that bad in Canada, we would know about it, absolutely. So there's no way it's 1 in 43, but there is obviously a risk. I'm not trying to diminish that, but 1 in 43 seems extremely high to me.
I'll send you the study. They actually assessed children that had no symptoms at all. They were asymptomatic, and they looked at their hearts before and after taking the vaccine. Okay. So I guess that brings up the question, is Canada doing, to the best of your knowledge, anything looking at children prior to taking the vaccine and after, whether they're symptomatic or not?
I know that there are a few researchers at BC who are looking at that. Whether they're doing it in the same way and would find the same thing if it were there, I can't say. But yeah, it is an important aspect to it to look at the children beforehand, obviously, rather than just look at the statistics afterwards.
Are you familiar with the study that recently showed that within the first 48 hours of breastfeeding mother having the vaccine, the infant is receiving mRNA from the breast milk? So I guess my question is, if we find ways to deliver it faster, do you think that the babies will be getting mRNA more, and what sort of research should be done in that area?
Yep, I haven't seen that particular study, but I know right now we can immunize moms or immunize moms with other vaccines to protect newborns. So whether or not that's the same for the mRNA vaccines, I really don't know, because you have to imagine that the mRNA has to be encapsulated in these lipid particles. I don't know how effective those lipid particles are themselves, or whether it's just the mRNA that gets to the fetus or the babies, right? So I haven't read that study.
And I might be getting the amount wrong. I think there was 3 million going for one thing and about 3.5. And one of those was so that it uptakes even more quickly. So maybe if you want to elaborate on that.
So basically, the main theme behind your questions were side effects, unintentional side effects of the vaccines, right? And that is very much what that first project that was mentioned is trying to go after. We're not, the stage that research is at is not at the point where we're going into humans to say whether this formulation works better than that formulation. It's more in cells, and then eventually it will be in animal models to test whether these different formulations have side effects. But really that first project is all about learning how to better formulate mRNA vaccines so that we minimize or eliminate the side effects altogether. For sure there's side effects. If there was 1 in 43, I think the vaccines never would have been approved. At the 1 in sort of 40 to 1 in 100,000.
We've had no long-term studies, but even if we take it to the Chief Medical Health Officer of Ontario, he says 1 in 5,000. Even that is quite different than what we were first told.
It definitely is. And I think, well, I'm not in a public health position to be able to weigh the costs and benefits of that, but the risks from actually getting COVID are still higher. So I think that that's probably where the public health, catching COVID, but also having bad effects, side effects, long-term side effects from COVID.
For children?
For quite high.
Not for children.
We don't know. We don't know.
Okay.
I guess.
The studies I've looked
haven't had it in children, being delivered to children for long enough to say, I would say.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. And the last question, one of the gentlemen who was up there sort of as an expert today acknowledges he wasn't aware of one of the studies I mentioned. But if we focus on the stat given by the Chief Medical Health Officer in Ontario, that it is now closer to 1 in 5,000 youth who are at risk from myocarditis from the vaccine, do you think that there should be an emphasis on money going towards really understanding that potential side effect from COVID-19 mRNA vaccines?
Definitely, if we have things to, if there are issues with the vaccine, whatever they are, and, whether there are side effects. So, for example, the project today would hopefully lessen some of those side effects. Should we have more research to look at COVID, how it affects children, long COVID, etc.? Absolutely, we need more research directed towards understanding this particular disease, as we do for, other diseases. So I would definitely say, we need research funding, and this would be for, not only this particular case, but just in general to be able to move forward.
Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome. Take care.
Well, there you have it. MP Sajjan, as well as the experts that were here today, didn't back down from answering the question, although some ways they kind of trickled around it. But you heard the question that was asked that you won't hear from the state-backed legacy media here on Rebel News. Drea Humphrey, and I'll see you next time. If you want to stay in the know about information you won't find out from the legacy state-backed media, be sure to check out how to become a Rebel News Plus subscriber by going to rebelnewsplus.com.